You probably remember the first time you saw one. Not in a zoo, not in a museum, not on television. Outside, in your own yard. A warm summer evening. The air still carrying the heat of the day. The grass cool beneath your feet. And then, somewhere near the edge of the lawn, a tiny flash appeared. Then another. Then another. Before long, the entire yard seemed alive. Small lights drifting through the darkness like floating stars. If you grew up anywhere in the eastern United States, chances are you remember that moment. You may have chased them with a jar. You may have tried to catch one in your hands. You may have stood perfectly still, watching the lights appear and disappear among the trees. For many Americans, those memories remain some of the strongest memories of childhood. But there is something almost nobody told us. Those lights were never random. Not a single one. Every flash you saw that night was a message, a carefully timed signal, sent by one living creature and intended for another. Some of those messages traveled only a few feet. Others crossed an entire backyard. But every single one had a purpose. And somewhere in the darkness, another firefly was waiting for exactly the right response. Think about that for a moment. While children were running through the grass, laughing and chasing lights, an invisible conversation was taking place above them. A conversation conducted entirely through flashes. No sound, no scent, no words, only light. And what makes that conversation even more remarkable is that it has been happening for millions of years. Long before suburban neighborhoods existed, long before porch lights, long before fences, driveways, and lawns, fireflies were already speaking to each other in the darkness, using one of the most sophisticated communication systems in the insect world. But here is the part most people never realize. The presence of fireflies tells you something important about your yard. Something that scientists have been studying for decades. Because fireflies are surprisingly selective. They do not appear just anywhere. They need darkness. They need moisture. They need healthy soil. They need conditions that are becoming increasingly difficult to find in modern America. Which means every flash you see is telling a story. Not just about the firefly, but about the environment around it. The health of your yard. The condition of your soil, and the hidden ecosystem operating beneath your feet every single night. In fact, if you still see fireflies regularly, your yard may already have something that many Americans are slowly losing. And by the end of tonight's story, I think you'll understand why that matters far more than most people realize. Let's start with the light itself, because the glow of a firefly is one of the strangest things in the natural world. Most lights create heat. A porch light becomes warm. A light bulb becomes hot. Even a small flashlight wastes energy through heat. But a firefly does something very different. Its light is produced through a chemical reaction inside a specialized organ near the end of its abdomen. Inside that tiny structure, a compound called luciferin reacts with oxygen in the presence of an enzyme called luciferase. The result is light, not heat, light. Scientists often refer to it as cold light, because almost none of the energy is lost as heat, and that efficiency is extraordinary. In fact, the light produced by a firefly is far more efficient than many human technologies. For decades, researchers have studied fireflies in hopes of understanding how nature solved a problem. Engineers are still trying to perfect, but the firefly never evolved that light for scientists. It never evolved that light for humans. It evolved that light for communication. And that is where the story becomes much more interesting, because every flash you see on a summer night is part of a conversation. Imagine standing in your backyard after sunset. The air is still. The trees are dark silhouettes against the fading sky. Then a flash appears, a brief pulse of greenish-yellow light. A few seconds later, another flash answers from somewhere lower in the vegetation. What looks random to us is often anything but random. One firefly is speaking, another is responding, and the timing between those flashes matters a great deal. Each species of firefly has its own language. Not words, not sounds, patterns. Some flash once, some flash twice. Some produce long pulses, others produce short bursts. Some wait several seconds before responding. Others answer almost immediately. and every one of those differences carries information. This is how fireflies recognize their own kind. This is how they avoid confusion. And this is how they find each other in the darkness. Think about how remarkable that is. A tiny insect no larger than your thumb can identify a potential mate in complete darkness using nothing but patterns of light. No roads, no signs, no technology, only timing, only precision, only biology. And on a warm July evening, hundreds of those conversations may be happening at the same time in a single field. Hundreds of invisible messages crossing the darkness. Yet somehow, the right signals find the right recipients. The right answers return to the right senders. And the conversation continues. But here is where things take a surprising turn. Because not every firefly is telling the truth. In nature, whenever a communication system becomes successful, eventually something learns how to exploit it. And fireflies are no exception. Somewhere in the vegetation sits a female firefly listening carefully. She is not listening for a male of her own species. She is listening for another species entirely. Waiting, watching, measuring the timing of every flash. Then, when the moment is right, she answers perfectly. Her response is so accurate that the male cannot tell the difference. To him, it sounds exactly like the reply he has been searching for. He changes direction. He follows the signal. He flies closer, 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 believing he has found a mate. But he hasn't. He has found a predator, one of the most remarkable examples of deception in the insect world. Scientists call these insects femme fatale fireflies, and the name is well-deserved, because these females do not simply trick males, they consume them. But the story becomes even stranger. The meal is not only food, it is protection. The species being eaten contains defensive chemicals, compounds that make predators less likely to attack. By consuming those males, the female acquires chemical defenses she cannot produce herself. She is not merely stealing energy, she is stealing a survival system, a biological shield. And all of this begins with a flash of light, a tiny signal drifting across a summer lawn. The peaceful light show we remember from childhood is hiding a drama that most people never see. Communication, deception, predation, survival, all unfolding silently above the grass. Yet the air above your garden is only half the story, because while adults are communicating through light, another world exists beneath them, a hidden world most homeowners never notice, a world beneath leaves, beneath mulch, beneath damp soil, a world where the next generation of fireflies is already hunting, and what those young fireflies are doing below ground may be even more important to your garden than the lights you see above it. And perhaps that is the part of this story that matters most. Not the chemistry, not the communication, not even the deception hidden within those flashes, but the fact that those lights are becoming harder to find. If you are over 30 years old, I want you to think back for a moment. Do you remember how many fireflies you saw when you were a child? Think about a summer evening from years ago, maybe your grandparents' yard, maybe a small town street, maybe a field behind your house. How many lights did you see? A dozen, 50, hundreds. Now compare that memory to what you see today. Is it the same? For many Americans, the answer is no. And that isn't just nostalgia. Scientists have documented measurable declines in firefly populations across many regions of North America. The reasons are not mysterious. Brighter nights, more development, more pavement, more pesticides, less habitat, less darkness, less of the world fireflies need to survive. And perhaps that makes every flash a little more meaningful than it once was. Because if you still see fireflies in your yard, even occasionally, your garden is telling you something positive, something increasingly uncommon. Your soil still supports life. Your habitat still provides shelter. Your nights are still dark enough for conversations made of light. And those conversations have been happening for far longer than any of us have been alive. Think about that the next time you step outside on a warm summer evening. Before you check your phone, before you turn on another light, before you go back inside, just stop for a moment. Watch, listen, not with your ears, with your attention. Because somewhere out there, a tiny signal is being sent. A flash, a pause, a reply, a conversation unfolding exactly as it has for millions of years. And the remarkable thing is that it is still happening at all, because every firefly you see tonight survived a journey most people never think about. It survived as an egg, as a larva beneath the soil, as a predator hunting in darkness, as a pupa hidden from sight, and finally, as a brief spark of light drifting through the summer air. Most will only live a few weeks as adults, a few weeks to find a mate, a few weeks to continue a cycle that began long before humans ever built houses in these landscapes. And somehow, despite everything changing around them, some are still here, still flashing, still searching, still speaking in light. That is worth noticing, and maybe that is the real secret hidden in your garden. Not that fireflies are rare, but that they are reminders. Reminders that healthy ecosystems still exist. Reminders that darkness still matters. Reminders that even the smallest creatures can tell us something important about the places we call home. Before we finish, I want to ask you something. When was the last time you saw a firefly? Was it this summer? Last year? Or has it been so long that you honestly can't remember? And if you still see them where you live, tell us where. What state are you in? Do you see just a few, or do you still see dozens lighting up the night? I'd genuinely love to know, because every comment becomes part of a larger map, a snapshot of where these extraordinary insects are still thriving. And one more question. When you were a child, did you ever catch fireflies in a jar? If you did, what do you remember most? The glow, the excitement, the feeling that summer would last forever. Share your memory below. I'd love to read it. Because some of the most meaningful conversations in this community begin with a simple childhood memory. And if tonight is the first time you've thought about fireflies in years, maybe this is your sign to step outside after dark and look again. You might be surprised by what is still there. I'll see you in the next one.